Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to host-tune-perform.com. This is Anand Goel, and in today's lecture, we will be talking about Ejabberd. So, what exactly is Ejabberd and what all things we are going to talk? So, if you see up the history, it was previously known as Jabber, and then it turned out to be a software which supports Xmpp, Mqtt, and SIP VoIP, that is Voice over Internet Protocol. So this time we will be touching base with some other technologies, some other protocols other than HTTPS. But like, what is the minimum requirement for you to take up this training? So before you go ahead with this training, I assume that you are already familiar about the computer architecture, and then you are familiar about the public and private IP addresses, and then you are familiar about HTTP protocol, at least, which is the very basic level protocol for the computer industries. So you people might have heard of things such as push notifications or instant messaging, then voice over call. So we people use WhatsApp, we can call, we can do a video call, then we can send a lot of media files, and our message from here, if we do a message from here, it reaches Australia or USA within like a second. So it is very fast. And why it is very fast, and what is the difference between like HTTP and XMPP and the email server, something like that. So we will be discussing all about it. So this is what like this chapter is. In this particular chapter, we will be talking about the theoretical part, and I will make sure that you people will be able to work with Ejabberd by yourself. So that's why I've given it a name, like saying, let us begin with Ejabberd. So as previously said, like I always assume that whenever you like read things, new things, so it becomes easier for you to grasp it if you see it by yourself. So this is an application which is already built. If you see up my screen over here, this application, let me maximize my screen. So this is the application which is already built, which is PSI. And you see that this application says that host-tune-perform is now online, now away, now online, now away. So it checked the idle status, which was 40, and that's why it said away. And now it again said, like, as I am typing something over here, let me hit an enter. So this type went in, and then this type came back to me because this is a chat window and I am the only user within this chat window. So you people must have seen the chat windows in various websites where like there are 10 people in a room, one types a message, and that message like is being delivered to everyone in that chat window. So all of these things, and most of like, if you just skip the advanced parts, so all the basic functionalities are already there in this free software. It is an open source software and it is known as Ejabberd. With Ejabberd, we have two other softwares, that is like OpenFire and Procedy, I think so. So these two are also open source XMPP servers, but Ejabberd is the mostly used and reliable and like gives you the maximum functionalities. A drawback with Ejabberd is that it, like for that you will have to learn a new language, that is Erlang, but it is also possible for you to create a client and let the server as it is. So it already gives you a lot of functionalities. If you are thinking to build up your own instant messaging, then this is the best part to start. Like, I don't think that you will be able to cover even the client part in 2 years or 3 years if you are like thinking to create something of your own, because you will have to create up the web client, then Android, then iOS, and it already has so many functions. The server already has so many functionalities implemented. So when you're writing up the client, so this is the client over here, this PSI, and this is being connected to the server, and the server is running on this Ubuntu box. So if I just show you up over here, so this is my server. So this server is already started. It says that, or it gives me a warning saying that it is not recommended to run Ejabberd as root. So I can run it with some other user obviously, but as of now I am running it with root, and this particular server is running, and this particular server has an IP address of, you can see, 192.168.0.109. If I go over here and instead of localhost, if I just type in 192.168.0.109 and hit an enter, it will show me the same results. So it is showing me the same results. We will talk about it, but at least till the time you can say that yes, this server is running on this box, and this client, this particular client is attached to this Linux box, and the user which is attached is host dash tune dash perform. I can go ahead and change the status as you change on Microsoft Teams or Google Talk. So you can say that I am away. It will ask you, do you want to change the status? Say yes. And I can again say, please do not disturb me, and just hit an enter, and the status has been changed. So both of these softwares are completely free to use. You can extend them. You can do whatever you want to do with them. And the next thing is like about about learning of this language. Is it necessary to learn this language to implement an instant messaging using Ejabberd? No. The client can be formed in various languages. You can form it in Java. We have libraries for Java. Then we have libraries for like HTTP Bosch. Similarly, we have libraries for a lot of languages, but you do not need to touch Erlang and the server until you want to extend it. Now let us see what all client libraries are there. So I have picked up this from the official website from Process One, which is the managing and the commercial party for Ejabberd. Obviously, we do have a commercial version of this open source software, but we also have an open source software which is Ejabberd. So it says that this particular Ejabberd supports these three things. One is Xmpp, second is Mqtt, and third is SIP service. So do not worry about them. We will talk about them in detail. Then it gives us RESTful APIs and Ejabberd CTL. Ejabberd CTL, if you're familiar about like Linux environment, in Ubuntu especially, we have like system CTL for managing the system. Similarly, for managing Ejabberd for doing all the administrative tasks such as creating up a user, finding the users, or like creating up the roster for a user. All of it can be done using Ejabberd DCTL command. So we will see about it like coming ahead. As of now, what you can do is you can just try to learn up the words. So it is very important to learn up new words so that in upcoming time you can understand them. Then we have an Xmpp framework for iOS. You can see we can create an iOS app, client side app, and the server will be Ejabberd itself, right, which is running on my Linux box. This client can be anything. This we are talking about this client, this PSI client. This can be on anything. Then for Android, we have these two libraries, Mac and Retro, and for web, we have Bosch, that is Troff Bosch. So we have these libraries, and we will talk about them in the next chapter. For this chapter, I will majorly focus on the theoretical part. So if we just move ahead, the next part is the difference between HTTP and XMPP. So why was there the requirement of creating a new protocol called as XMPP while we already had one protocol which was HTTP? So the reason was a very simple reason, and the answer to it is real-time messaging. So I will just write it as RTM. That is real-time messaging. If you see in HTTP, only a web client can contact the server. A client contact the server, and the server contact like give the client the response. But here in HTTP, these two servers cannot contact with each other. So we do not have a server to server communication, and that's why real time messaging becomes a problem. And hence, we came up with a solution where a server 2 can contact with server 1. So in terms of Jabber, we say it as S2S or C2S, that is client to server communication and server to server communication. So these are the two terms which are being used, but yes, the servers can communicate with each other. So if you have a Ejabberd server over here and you have another Ejabberd server over here, they can communicate with each other. So that's why when a client sends in a request to server 2, this sets the request to server 1, and this can go to client 1 over here. and in this way, like these work. So one thing like people usually ask is like, how does this server is able to like send the message to this client directly without this client being the first party to initiate the request? So this is done via long running react like connections. So what I mean by that, by long running connections, is that when you say that there is a client 4 and it is making a connection with server 2. So like in case of HTTP, it will not just like hit a get request and then get a response and close the connection. No, this will not happen. This will open up a stream with server 2, and this stream will kept remain open until this client is online. This is what is called as presence. And this is how push notifications are sent, because these two have already are already in connection. So for push notifications, like this server can directly send messages to this client because they are already connected and their connections never break until the client logs out. So until you log out of WhatsApp, until then you already have a connection with a WhatsApp server. So this is what it means, and this is how like this protocol works. Now, if we go next and see SMTP versus XMPP, so what is the difference? So in SMTP also two servers can interact with each other, but what exactly is the difference? When you say that a client is sending a request to another client, a mail to another client, so this goes to server 1, that is abc.com, and the mail has been sent to xyz.com. But there is another intermediate server which is like mnq.com. So this can happen in email server, that abc request can go to xmq and then this can go to xyz at last. But multiple hops are not allowed in Java, and this is the major difference. What it means? This means that if this particular client is sending a request to this client, then this request will go to server 2 and it will go directly to server 1. It will not go to server 3 and then not go to server 1 and then not go to. So it can take various paths, but it takes the shortest path, and like it has no hops. It directly reaches the server, and that's why it is faster. And this is the difference between SMTP and XMPP architecture wise, not functionality wise. Functionality wise, both of them are completely different. One is for email services and the second is for instant messaging. If I go ahead, the next protocol which is being supported by this Ejabberd is MQTT protocol. And now let us discuss about the differences between MQTT and XMPP first. So if you talk about XMPP, which is this particular thing, so we have already discussed that it has a client server architecture, and in the similar way, MQTT also has the same architecture as XMPP. It also does not allow multiple hops, so the the message reaches from client A to client B directly. So what is the difference? Difference is that MQTT is a message broker. It does not define any format of the message. If client A is sending something, anything to client B, the server will not read it. It will just pass it to client B. But in case of XMPP, when a client sends in a message, it sends it in XML format, and this XML format is read by the server. It can store the archive messages. So if WhatsApp comes to you and say that they are not archiving your messages, you cannot be sure, because Ejabberd, the open source software itself, has the capability of maintaining the history of messages. So they have a proper format in which the client sends the message, the server reads it, and then they give the response if required. So in particular, like XMPP works on three kind of stanzas. One is message. Please try to memorize them as of now. We will talk about them in detail. Second is IQ, and the third is presence itself. So anyhow, this is a protocol for instant messaging. That's why a message stanza. Then it names it as extensive markup and presence protocol. That's why Presence Stanza. And IQ is nothing but a questionnaire. You can say a questionnaire, which is like you are asking something from the server and it is giving you the results. Or you are saying the server, please save this information, it is just saving the results. But this is not the case with MQTT, and that's why it is a like lightweight software because it does not have any format, and it is majorly used with the IoT devices. So IoT device like sends in a message. This IoT device sends in a message to the broker, and this broker sends it to all the publishers. So all of these publishers are already registered to this broker, and they are having a long running connection. Because they are having a long running connection, this can send the messages to them, right? It can send messages to them, and the messages has come from this particular IoT device. So this is nothing but a message broker, and these days MQTT broker is even termed as MQTT server, which is actually right. One more thing I would like to tell you is like WhatsApp is built upon like something which is equivalent to Jabber, which is on XMPP, and Facebook Messenger is built upon MQTT. Next part, which is supported by Ejabberd, is SIP and VoIP. VoIP is Voice over Internet Protocol. That is like the WhatsApp chats which we do over call. So we can call over WhatsApp. We can do a video call over WhatsApp. This is all done using VoIP. So before like talking about SIP and VoIP like in detail, at first we will have to discuss about something called as NAT. So this is a very important word to understand and a very important concept to understand before you go ahead and see this. So I am reiterating myself. My agenda for today is to make sure that you understand the grasp the theoretical part so that you are aware of the words and then the technologies behind all the things. So you can just see the full form of the acronyms, which is VoIP, which is Voice over Internet Protocol. SIP is Session Initiated Protocol. Stun is session traversal of user datagram protocol through network address translators. We will discuss about it in some minutes. So these two things are very important in this context, which are stun and turn. And the next thing is traversal using relay NAT, and why it is required. We will also discuss about it in detail. So what is NAT? So to understand it, let us understand public and private IP. So you can see up my system. I have just gone to what is my ip.com, and this is what it is being shown. So as of now, my particular laptop is connected to a Wi-Fi, and this Wi-Fi is at my home. So the Wi-Fi name is Anand Goel, as you can see over here, and this Wi-Fi like has given my particular system an IP address which I can fetch from command line. I can just go to command line and say ipconfig. So after doing this, I will get an IP address something like this. So you can see that this IP address has been given to me by this Wi-Fi. But this Wi-Fi is connected to some system which is at internet service provider place, and that system has an IP address of this, and this is the public IP address because the IPv4 IP addresses like are not a lot of them. That's why there was something which was called as NAT which was created, and because of this there was another problem which arose. Let me show it to you. So let us treat this way that there is a company who has bought up a lease line, and this lease line like has an IP address, a public IP address of this. Let me mark up. This is the public IP address of the company, and this is the public IP address of the company B. Say let's B, and this is for A. So both of them has brought up a lease line and has got a public IP address. But in this company we have a lot of systems. In A company we have a lot of system where this is the router, and the router has an internal or private IP address of this. In the similar way, like it has a private, this has a computer system which has a private IP address of this, and the web server is located at company B, and this is the web server, and this has the public IP address. Assume that. Now what will happen if this guy wants to access a page which is hosted on this system? This guy will hit a request to this IP address on port 80, because it is on port 80 where HTTP server like takes up the default HTTP request, and it will hit a get request, say for example, and this system will take up this request and will respond to it, like according to the request. If it is a get, put, post, anything, so it will respond to it, but it will go back to this IP address. Now when it sends the results back to this IP address, that is 192.168.1.3, this router does not know about it, because this is a private, and this actually does not reach, this response actually does not even reaches this IP address. It does not reaches this IP address. So because of this, there is something called as NAT, which is network address translation, which happens up in the network. So what happens? This guy will actually send the request to this guy, and like before sending the request outside, what this router will do, it already has pre-built softwares which does the job for you. This router will change this IP address to its own IP address, and it will mark an entry in its table saying yes, this particular IP address within the private network has sent a request outside, and when the request response comes back to this IP address, it should divert it back to here. This is what like this table is being used, and this is what we also called as, like we call it as port forwarding. So what is port forwarding? We are telling of this NAT that anything which comes on port 80 over here, please forward it to over here. So you can just mark it of a kind of NAT which is port forwarding. There are various different kind of NATs, so we will discuss about it again back. If we go ahead and now see, now this particular server, which is this server, will send the response back to public IP, which is this. So now it is reachable to this IP, and now from here it will check its table. So in the previous slide it created up a table, right? And in that table it was written that whatever comes back to this should go to this, and that's how it is going to it. Now the question is how this table is being created. So there are a lot of ways of creating up this table. So what ways are there? So we can say that we have an entry which is always there saying that this particular system is mapped up with this. So this is nothing but a full cone NAT, full cone NAT. And what does it mean? It means that even if this particular system has not sent a request to this particular server can send back the request to it. How? Let me show you how. So if we already have an entry which is something like this in the table, this system will send a request to it, to this IP address, and this will automatically be forwarded over here because we already have an entry. This is what called as full cone NAT. Now what will happen if we restrict this entry and we say that please make up this entry only when the request is being sent by this. So whenever this sends a request it to this router, it will make up this entry and send the request to the server. Server will respond and it will come back, and as soon as this will come back, this particular router will clear off this entry. So what will happen in this case, when we do not have any entry of this system in this table and this sends a request to it, it does not know where to send it because it does not have any entry. So this is a restricted cone mode, which means that this server can send request to this server only when the request is initiated by this server. this client, sorry, not the server, right? Now the third type which comes in is the port, that is port forwarding. What we call over here is, here we are making a one-to-one mapping of the combination of port and IP address. Now we see that this particular thing has the port 42301, right? So, and you are sending up a request to some particular server, and you are sending the request from this particular port. So you are not blocking the router entirely. So you are just blocking the port and not saying this router IP address. This IP address is bounded with this IP address. No, you are saying that this port, any request coming back to this port is bounded to this IP address and port, but this IP address remains free. If you see up here, this is correct. So this IP address, remove this IP address, this thing, this complete set is now being bounded only to this port. So whenever something comes back to this port, it is automatically routed. So this way, this particular table can have multiple entries of this IP address on different ports. So to make sure that different servers can be connected using different ports, and you are making full use of the combinations and probability and combinations, PNC. So we did study it in mathematics some way back, that is permutation and combination. This is what like it is all about. And the last part, which is symmetric NAT. It is very important to understand this part, which is symmetric NAT. What happens in symmetric NAT? Now, what happens in symmetric NAT? Say, for example, this server is sending in a request outside, so this will go through this router, and this router will create a NAT table, and this will go to the server, and the server responds back. So as the server responds back, this particular router will check the IP address from where this request is coming, and it will only accept it if this is coming from this server. If by mistake, and what would have happened, this server already have the public IP to reach this place, right? And it says to some other server, please respond on my behalf. That is not possible. So a request for a server can be responded by only that server, that is symmetrical, like NAT. And these are the four major kind of NAT services which are being used, and I have created up a slide for them. You can see that I have shown you like normal full cone NAT, restricted NAT, then we have port restricted cone NAT, and the symmetric NAT which we are talking about. And the concept where we say that is hole punching. What is this concept? Let me reiterate myself, because this is a very important concept, hole punching. Say for example, we are having another server over here which is having an IP address of 40.30.20.11, right? So it has an IP address of this, and this particular system sends in a request to this router, and this router creates up a table, NAT table, which we were just discussing, and this sends in the request to this server. Now this server knows where to send back the request. It knows that the request would be sent back to this, and then the NAT table will direct it to this particular private system. But what this server does is, this server sends the request to this server, which is 10 40 30 20 2011, and says this, bro, I am not able to cater the request, you please cater the request, and this serves the request, and this sends the request to this. So now the request is coming from 40 30 20 11, and this is nothing but hole punching, because the request was initially sent to this server, but this server is not answering it. So what this server can do, and how people can misuse it, what they can do is, this server, let me again reiterate it, it is very important for me to reiterate it. So this server will send a request to this server via this router, and this will create an entry in the NAT table. But this time this will create a long running connection. So as you create a long running connection, the entry in the NAT table is always there. It will not get deleted until this particular server goes offline, right? So it creates a long running connection, and this particular port will always reach up here, and this knows how to penetrate into the private network and reach up this system, right? So it can tell its address to n number of servers. It can say you also use this address, this is of this person, you also use this address, this is of this person, you also use this address, this is of this person. Now in case of symmetric NAT, what happens is this response from this server is only accepted when it is coming from the server to which the request was made. Hence, it cannot distribute it to different servers saying, please respond to this. No, because this server has different IP address. This server also has different IP address, and they cannot send back the request to this server. Anyhow, there is a concept called in networking called as IP masquerading, which is like changing up the address, IP address of the sender. So that is a different concept, but again, hole punching is very difficult in symmetric, and like this is where like the things come out between the difference between turn and stun. So we discussed about this, right? These two things are very important for VoIP, stun and turn. So this is the difference. Like stun is used where we do not have symmetric NAT, and turn is used where we have symmetric NAT, because in turn we will always need a relay server. Why we need a relay server? Because we need to pretend. We always need to pretend that the request is coming back to it from this server, even if this server is replying, right? And this is how like all of these things are done in the industry. So this is a slide which I have prepared for stun and turn. So you can see that XMPP serves on long running connections. Still there's an intermediary server for data transfer between clients. So why they are used? They are used for direct contact of peers. So when you're saying that client A is having a telephonic conversation with client B, so this telephonic conversation cannot have an XML format specifically, right? So this cannot send it to XMPP server or like Ejabberd server and then say like please help me. No, they need to have a direct contact, and that's why we are like using of the concepts such as like hole punching, stun. So anyhow, these two are very similar words and the usage are very similar, but hole punching is something which is used, a term which is used for network threat, whereas stun and turn servers are realistic and they are absolutely for this particular purpose, that is for VoIP, and here the user knows that its identity is being shared for long running connections. So this is the difference between stun server and hole punching, because it is about the usage of the concept which makes change of these words, right? And in the second case, like we are having a turn server, because in symmetric case we need to make sure that the request is also coming back from the same server from to which the request has been made. So these were a few diagrams, and the next thing and a very important thing is VoIP architecture, and another important thing over here is SIP. Let me show you SIP. So in our offices, we all have computer PCs, then we have these telephones, then we have conferencing systems, and so we all know that using Teams we can connect all of them, or using some other softwares like Google. So we can connect all of them. How? So SIP is session initiated protocol, which is used worldwide industry for telephonic conversations. So all of these telephones understand the language of SIP. It has various commands like acknowledge and a lot of different commands. What is PBX? Within an office, say we have an office in Delhi branch, within an office these two phones can be connected and can talk to each other using PBX. So there will be a wire which will be taken from here, it will attach to PBX, there will be a wire from PBX and which will get attached to it. Similarly, there will be a wire which might get attached to this PC, and the SIP software can talk to this or these two can talk to each other. But when we have another branch in Bombay and this particular phone needs to contact with this phone, so this particular router has its own NAT, this router has its own NAT, and to communicate from this system to this system, they both have to reach each other. So this particular phone should know the public IP so that it can reach, and that's why we are using up stun and turn, because these are the two things which are being used to fetch the IP address, the public IP address. So we have just discussed about it in the concept while we talk about NAT. If you still have queries on it, you can go ahead and write up a comment to me, or you can personally ping me on LinkedIn or Facebook. I will be very happy to help you. So the next part which I want to discuss is about the installation of Ejabberd. So to install Ejabberd, we have some dependencies. First this dependency, second this dependency. Then third, we have to download the source code. So if you see out over here, I have the source code out here with me. So this is the source code, and you can see that it has various files such as autogen.sh configure file, and then like this, after running this file we will have a make file. This is not the actual make file, this is makefile.in. There will be another file created after running the configuration file, which is make file, and we can even install it from the installer. I guess Ejabberd gives us the installer, or either from the command from the package repository, or else we can install it from the source, which is what we are talking about as of now. So these are the dependencies. After using downloading, installing them, you can just unzip this particular file. I just showed you the already unzipped file on Windows. So after doing this, what you need to do is you need to run the autogen command, which I just showed you, then configure it. This will create a make command, then run the make command, then say make install. So make has various parts. This is a file, it will have a part 1, then semicolon, some commands, then we have part 2, that is install, and then some commands. Then we may have different parts. So we can, like, this make is a tool which is used in approximately 99% of the cases in the industry, where we are installing the software from the source. And the last is ejabberd.yml. This is nothing but the configuration file, and this configuration file is present out here. If I just exit it, you can see that it is in user local etc, and I say ls, it has a folder called as ejabberd. Please ignore this file because this I have created as a copy for my like future use. So I will just say sudo su, which is taking me to the root user, and say cd ejabberd, and here I say ls, and you see that we have these three commands files. So after installation, you will be seeing up all these folders. So you see that most of the folders are in user local. We have etc folder, we have sbin folder, we have lib folder, we have var lib, then we have var log, and all of them have different purposes. So these are the purposes of these folders and how they are being created. So we have already seen this local user etc jabberd. This has these three files. We have already seen that these three files, which is here, right? So after these three files, we also have files in lib, and this is the beam file. Like in Java, we have a source code in .java and the compiled version in javac. Similarly, here we have .beam, which is the compiled version, and .erl for Erlang source code file. HRL is for the header file. Like in C language, we have hash include iostream.h, that is for header file. Then this is the space for runtime files. These are some executable files or the modules which are used in Ejabberd. So module is also very important while learning about Ejabberd. Let us treat it this way and leave it as of now here. Then these are some basic libraries, and then these are some message transitions files. This is this Ejabberd DCTL command for administrative purposes. These are the documentation. Then we have cookie and ACL. ACL is nothing but access level, which defines the access level. Then these are two for the logs. This is the folder structure which is creating after installation on a machine. So the next part which we will be discussing up today is the Jabber ID. So to understand this part, let me go back to the very top here. And here we see that this particular server is serving these three clients. So how will this server know which client it is talking about? So it creates an identity of a client, and this identity is called as Jabber ID. So I will just say JID. And how will I show it to you? I will show it to you over here. So you can see over here that this is the JID for this particular setup, which is admin is the username @jabberd/laptop. So this particular client is working on this laptop, right? So that's why at the end this has a laptop, but the server is running on a Ubuntu box and the host name is Ejabberd. If I just go over here and type in host name, you can see that the host name is Ejabberd. In the similar way, this particular box, this Windows box has the host name of this. You can see, right? I have typed in a command which is hostname and it is laptop tf something like that. So if I come back over here, you can see up over here that this is my username. This user is for this particular server, that is Jabber D, and is the request is coming. The client is this. Now you people must already be aware of WhatsApp, and you should know it that on WhatsApp we can like log in into the same account from different phone, like from phone 1, then phone 2, then phone 3, and this is nothing but this Jabber ID. So you can say that this client 1 is connected from a mobile and also from a computer. So in these two addresses, these parts remain the same, which says that this is a client which belongs to this particular Jabber server, but the request is coming from a computer or this request is coming from a mobile. This part is different, and this is called as resource. From where the request is coming is resource, from where it is going is the initial part. In this similar way, you can see client 3 is logged on mobile 1 and mobile 2. Hence, these two parts remain the same, but the resource changes from mobile 1 to mobile 2. Client 2 is only on mobile, and hence the mobile network is up. So this was about Jabber ID. And next we will be talking about Xmpp stanzas in a while. So Xmpp stanza are basically of three types. So you can see out here, at first the client opens the connection stream, and at last the client only closes the connection stream. So C means client, S means server. When we say that this is client, so it means that this particular message or XMPP or XML stanza is being sent by this particular client, that is PSI. And when we talk about this server, it means that this particular stanza is being like returned by this server to this client, which is PSI, right? So what happens is, one is the presence stanza. So here it says my presence is this, my presence is this, my presence is this. If you go over here, I just say that please show me away. So it asks you that the status is away, and you can set up the priority, and then there are a lot of other things where you can say that I'm work, I'm traveling while you are away. So, and you can say that just set, and this will set your presence to this particular thing that is away, and all the requests, all your friends who are connected with you on the instant messaging server will know that you are away. So it means that whenever you push up this presence to the server marks all the associated roster of yours who are like who should know your presence, and it marks them a message saying that you are away, you are this, you are that, and similarly all the other things. The second type of stanza in XMPP is IQ stanza. IQ stanza is nothing but it is very similar to the HTTP request, which is get request, post request, put request. So this is also a request of type get. We can have a request of type set. We can have a request of type error, where server is returning about error. So get means that please give me my all the contact list. So roster. in Ejabberd. What is a roster in Ejabberd? Roster is nothing but a contact list. So in your phone you have your contact list, and in the similar way in Microsoft Teams you have your contact list. This is nothing but the Jabber IQ roster. So whenever the client hits up a request which is something like this, or the server responds to this request with another IQ stanza, and this stanza has type result. The important thing is type result. Another important thing over here is XMLNS, which is nothing but XML namespace. So this namespace are predefined namespace. These are nothing but the URIs, and you have to learn them. In this case, this particular namespace means that we need to contact to the roster of this particular user, whosoever is asking for this stanza. So it says that the roster has these three items. It means that these three are the friends of this particular person who is sending up this stanza. The next is the message stanza. The message is like party client A is sending a message to client B, and this message has this particular text. So this should reach to this, right? So it does not require a response because this message is for this. So this message will go to the server. Server will see this message and will take it to this particular client. Again, this is a message stanza, and at last there is again a presence stanza, which is for logout, where you're saying that presence, please mark my presence as logout, type unavailable. And at the last you're closing of the streams. So without opening the streams, you cannot communicate between client and server, and you cannot send these stanzas. So opening the stream and ending the stream is very important. So in actual case, for opening the stream, there might be a requirement for security such as start TLS, or you might have to do some JWT work, that is JavaScript Web Tokens, or OAuth2 authentication, or maybe SSL, TLS, I'm not sure, but there are a lot of authentications. So we will be discussing about them in a later stage. So I have already marked up and kept up a lot of tutorial material for you all separately. But as of now, let us concentrate on Xmpp stanzas. One more thing which I want to tell you is, like, when you're working on a client library such as Smack for Android, which is in Java, you do not need to know these stanzas. So that language is completely on Java, and that gives you complete functions. It will create the XML by itself. All you need to do is like just fill in various functions and fill in the arguments, right? Second, let us detail out the message stanza. The message stanza can be of type chat, group chat, headline. You can see out here this particular message stanza is of type chat, right? You can see out here this is of type chat. So we have a normal message stanza which is like from and to. A message is delivered from address to a deliver to a address. Group chat is like a message from a person is delivered to a group chat. It means that message is not for a specific person. It is a case of pub sub, that is publication and subscribers. Subscribers subscribes to a group, and then when you publish some item on a group, that item is being like sent to everyone which is a part of that group. So again, we have a lot of functionalities. We can kick off some out of a group, or like in WhatsApp we have a WhatsApp group, right? So this is the difference. When we are sending a one-to-one message, that is a normal message on WhatsApp. When we are creating up a group, that is a group chat message. Then we can have an error message from the server back to the client. And again, chat is also a one-on-one, but chat has more advantages. Like chat can find out if you are not typing in anything, you are idle, or you are away, or you are writing. When on WhatsApp, when you write, there is a line which comes in like this person is typing in. So in the similar way, these are the various types of messages. If I go ahead, we have various chat states. So we were just talking about it, about chat states. So these chat states are in messages. So you can say that you see that this particular person is active now. See, because this person has just moved his finger on his mobile or laptop like this, and he has become active. Now he's writing, composing. So the as soon as you type or start composing on your client should send up this message to the server. So in this message, this should be there, that is composing, and this is the namespace. This remains the same. We will have to learn them. The namespaces remain the same and we have to learn them. And in this particular thing, we say that, oh, this person is now gone. So we have various states of a chat. So that's why it is different from a normal message, because normal message does not have these states. So a person can be in inactive state, it can be in active state, it can be in gone state, composing state, or post state. If I just go ahead, then you can see that why I have taken up this picture is to show you up that a XML message stanza in Ejabberd can be combined with HTML. You can see that the body is written in HTML. So that's why all the styles, all the formats of HTML. So it becomes so easy because most of the people know HTML, right? So embedding HTML inside XML becomes easier. So it means whenever you are passing up the argument for body in Xmpp library for Java, so you can type in like typing not just the text or the string type, but you can also type in the HTML, right? So if I go ahead, so this is the presence protocol message stanza, and you say that this is present from and to, it does not matter, the from and to does not matter. So it shows the presence, which is XA. XA means that you are gone from your island client. Then, sorry, that you are gone for a longer period. So these two have this difference. Away is like you have just gone now, and XA is for longer period. DND is do not disturb, and chat is like you are available for chat. So these are different types of show when you are logged in, and then you can have these status, show status. And status is nothing but the status which you see on your WhatsApp ID. You can change up your status, right? So this is that status, and these are different type of show types on presence. And we also have type, something called as type in presence. So what it means, type subscribe. So when we say that, we have sister and we have Alice. We have these two person which are your users on your say Ejabberd server. So this sister went away, but this does not want Alice to know that she went away. So what will happen, like at first sister will have to, like this Alice will have to subscribe to sister. It says from Alice to sister, and it says like, I want to know your status, please let me subscribe. Now this sister will either approve, disapprove, or do something like that, and then if it approves, then it will be subscribed. So whenever this sister changes the status, this call will automatically send to Alice also. So this is the approval and disapproval. Second is the probe. How does like the other person knows? Say Alice has already subscribed to sister and sister has approved. Now sister changes up the presence type, and now like, but Alice was not online, right? Now Alice has become online and he's probing to the server. Like, I am now online. Please let me know what all my contacts are online and offline. This is probing, and like then the server will say, oh, like these all people are online or offline. Last one is the unavailable type. So you see over here in the previous slide, we discussed about the show. Here we were discussing about the show, and here we are discussing about the type. So last is the unavailable type, which is nothing but the logout type when you are logging out of the system. The third type of stanza is the IQ stanza. So this stanza works in a way like the client sends a request and it gets a response. This is not the case with message and presence. Here the client sends the request and does not expect a response. But here the client sends a get request and it expects a result response. It can send a set request, it expects a result response. So this can be easily seen out here. You can see it out here, right? So you see that there are two IQ. One is above, which is saying get me all the rosters, and the server resulted with result and given all the rosters back, right? So the type over here was get. Similarly, the type can be get, set, results. So result and error are mostly given by the server back to the client, and get and set are the types which are sent from the client, right? If I just move ahead, so then we have called as something called as Xmpp vcards. So let me pause for a second for you and then again say Xmpp vcards. So till now we were talking about rosters. Rosters mean people who are your friends. So these people must have their personal information. So there was some extensions which were made onto Xmpp protocol, and one of these extensions is vcard. So this extension is nothing but a module in Ejabberd. Rather, all the extensions of Xmpp which are supported by Ejabberd are different modules for Ejabberd. But the very basic module remains Ejabberd C2S and Ejabberd S2S, which is server to server, and Ejabberd client to server. So here you say that a message from this person to this person, and this is the message. But before replying to mouse, Alice, before replying to Alice, mouse wants to know what exactly or who exactly is Alice. So this time this sends a IQ message to its server or to Alice from mouse and say please get me your vcard. Now see the difference over here, that this vcard has a namespace of this which is not same as of roster. That's why it is a different module, right? And all the functionalities, all the extensions in the similar way have different names, and they are fixed, right? And to this, a response was received to this particular person from the server. Oh, you want to know about this person because he's asking your presence? See, this has this, the name is Alice, the URL is this, the photo is this, and all the other things. So vcard has its own information, right? And the type of IQ is result. So this was to make sure that you understand the extensibility. That's why we call it as Xmpp, which is highly extensible markup and presence protocol, because it can be extended into any area, right? Or we can extend a lot of functionalities into it. So next is Ejabberd architecture. So in Ejabberd architecture, we can have a server situated on a machine. So remember the first image where we had a triangle of three servers, and like those three servers were like let me open up that. It might become easier for you to see, right? So I'm talking about this image. Here you can see that we have three servers which are interconnected with each other, and then we have different clients. And if you see over here this architecture, the server is installed on this machine, say, then on this machine, and then on this machine. Then all these three machines will have its own data modules, will serve different domains. A single machine can serve more than one domain in Ejabberd. And you see over here that we have something called as a module for vcards. We just discussed about vcards. Then we have a message archive module. Then we have rosters. We discussed about rosters. Then authentication for connecting of the streams. What kind of authentication is required? You see S2S, that is federation, server to server. You see C2S, that's a client to server. And you have internal routing mechanism, like what all people should be aware, or like message should go from where to where. So all of that depends on the Jabber ID. And similarly, we have various other modules, which is PubSub, which is publisher and subscriber, which is also being used in MQTT. And this is why MQTT is famous for, because of PubSub. We can have group chat, multi-user chat, that is person can go offline. We can see the last activities. We can transfer media using view IP. Then we can have anonymous access, personal events. So we have security, even we have security modules out there. We have different scripts. So when we say modules, what are modules? Modules are nothing but scripts. So if I go to my page over here, and if I just open up this source code, and in this source code, if I go to libraries, no, if I go to plugins, no, source code. So here in this source code, you see all the source code. You can see that Ejabberd D C2S, right? That is client to server. And in this similar way, if I just move down, you can have Ejabberd D HTTP for RESTful APIs. Then if I move down, authentication, for authentication we have these OAuth. If I move down, we have S2S and we have SIP. Then if I move down, we have stun. You can see that a module for starting up the stun server. So how to start up, how to connect a module with the main Ejabberd engine, we will talk about it in the next video. As of now, just take in the words so that it becomes easier for you in the next video. Then if I move ahead, let me come back and as this, and you can see all the modules. So these were all the major files, all the like the starting with Ejabberd were all the major files which are for Ejabberd initial release. Then there are some modules. These modules are nothing but the extensions. So the extension can be for the disco. So disco is nothing but a discovery command in Xmpp. We will talk about it later. So this is a discovery command which is to discover the next items in your roster, or maybe in your list, some, no, not the roster exactly. Then we have a module for Mqtt. You can see that it supports Ejabberd supports Mqtt, Voip and Xmpp. So how it supports? It supports using different modules, and in a similar way it has different other functionalities associated with Mqtt. If I just go down, we have proxy, we have share server, we have v cards. So you can see that v cards over here which we just discussed, right? V cards. So we have a lot of different codes for V cards. If I move ahead, then we can even connect to Prosody. You can see over here. Then we have REST and PubSub, like publisher and subscriber modules, right? So these were all initially built up. That's why they do not have this mod underscore, but all these mod underscore were like built up later as a part of this architecture. But this is how this architecture is built up, right? Second is major Ejabberd ports. So in like case of Ejabberd, all the ports and all the modules and services are defined in the configuration file, that is .yml file, which we saw like maybe half an hour before while we were discussing about the installation folders. So by default, these C2S connections are made on this for IPv4 and on this for IPv, like for this particular system. And it is denied for a user called as bad. In the similar case, S2S connections are for port this. Web admin is on port 5280 by default. So what is web admin? This is web admin. So I am connected to this web admin, you can see over here. So this is Ejabberd. This is the port which is 5280, and this is the admin, web admin. And here I can see all the virtual hosts and a lot of things, which I will be showing you up. If I go back to my slide, you can see over here that it also supports AIM transport. So like HTTP, like XMPP, we have AIM transport, we have ICQ transport. It has support for MSN, it has support for Yahoo, it has support for Gudu, and it has support for Jabber mail component. And all of them have a different default port. Obviously, you can change it as per your usage, but these are the default ones. If I go ahead, so this is something which I wanted to discuss before we go ahead and close the chapter for today, that is top Xmpp softwares. So we will be having a tutorial on Ejabberd, but we also have Prosody and OpenFire. OpenFire is on Java, Prosody is on Lua, and Ejabberd is on Erlang. Even though you will have to learn Erlang for Ejabberd if you want to extend it, but like Erlang is being used very commonly in telecommunication industry, and if you want to be a part of telecommunication industry, you should go ahead and learn Erlang. Next is usage of these products in real life. So Ejabberd is the most used one, Prosody is the next, and OpenFire is the last one. Memory usage is something like this. Prosody uses the most memory, Ejabberd next, and OpenFire the last. Multi-core is like if your system is having multiple cores, 4 core, 5 core, 6 core processor, it does not allow multi-core processing. Ejabberd does allow parallel processing, multi-core processing. OpenFire does allow. Web admin, we do not have web admin for processor. We have admin for Ejabberd and OpenFire. So this is the admin. This is not properly configured as of now, but yes, we have the web admin. Next is why Ejabberd. So because the community is very strong. So till now, like for my research for this video, it was very difficult. Like I had to spend a lot of hours, like which took around like 2 months, and a regular consistent work for this 1 or 1.5 hour video. So still, like I say that the rock, like the Ejabberd has rock solid documentation. Still there is a lot of things which have to be like documented. It is not so good as HTTP community, but yes, for Xmpp, Ejabberd has the vast like uh, documentation and like support. So it has its own admin command. Then it also supports turn and turn, which is for video and audio. Then it supports clustering and it supports roster. So what is the major difference? Like con of this is like it does not support external service discovery. This is what like I found out while using it. So what is Disco? Disco is like discovering the parts, like the inner parts of an IQ message. Like when you say a roster, you have 10 rosters. Then after roster, you can query within the data. Like for a particular person, you want to know the uh, all the subscription to that person. You have provided all the subscription to that person. So something like that. That is the discover that can be done using the discovery command, which gives all the inner elements within a state. I say it this way. Then if I go ahead, so these are a few features for Ejabberd. So what are the features? You can see that Ejabberd is cross-platform and it is like well distributed. And then you also see that it is fault tolerant because it's on behavior. Erlang is fault tolerant, and that's why it is so famous. It works on behavior. So you say Erlang slash OTP. This is the work of OTP. Why it is fault tolerant? Because OTP has supervisor, it has general servers, then it has two more types of behaviors, and then you can create your own behaviors. So we'll talk about it in detail. Then it is administrator friendly using the YML languages. It supports mostly all the security. It supports mostly all the databases. It has various authentication types and a lot of other things which are being supported by this particular community. And that's why I am a big fan of it too. So this brings this lesson to the close, and let us meet in the next lesson of this series. Thank you guys. Have a great